Exposed, a lonely CEO discovers a shivering nurse and her baby at a bus stop. A life-changing journey begins. It was a typical frigid Chicago evening, the air biting cold, as Mark stood outside the high-rise that housed his bustling tech startup. A low hum of traffic surrounded him, muffled by the swirling snowflakes that danced in the air like lost dreams. Mark, a 38-year-old CEO with a tailored suit and the sharp gaze of power, felt a disquiet deep within. Despite the success and accolades that surrounded him, an unbearable loneliness weighed heavily on his chest, making it hard to breathe. He was lost in thought, waiting for his Uber, when his eyes caught a flicker of something raw and real. A woman hunched over at a nearby bus stop. Emily, a dedicated nurse in her early 30s, was cocooning her newborn against the chill. She shivered, her breath puffing out in clouds that mingled with the frosty air. Mark felt an ache deep in his heart, a memory tugging at him from the depths of his childhood. He remembered the biting cold of poverty that had once enveloped him, a time when warmth was a luxury and hope often felt fleeting. With overwhelming instinct, he crossed the street. "Hey there," he said softly, approaching her as if she might break. Emily looked up, her eyes wide and weary, yet sparking with resilience. They engaged in conversation, and her vibrant spirit shone through each word she spoke. She was a community pillar, full of hope and dreams, but now, burdened under the weight of crushing student debt and a broken healthcare system. "Some days, it feels like I'm fighting a never-ending battle," she said, her voice a mixture of frustration and hope. Mark felt the visceral connection with her words. He was reminded of the struggles that ordinary people faced, his privilege a stark contrast against her reality. Driven by concern, as he listened to her heart-wrenching story, he offered, "I can help you find more stable housing for you and your child." The words poured out before he could think, driven by a sense of urgency. Emily's gratitude was palpable, yet he felt a hitch of uncertainty growing within him. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. However, the moment of hope turned precarious. Around the corner, Mark's well-heeled colleagues observed with raised eyebrows, their judgment apparent. "Self-sufficiency is key," they muttered, their disdain hanging in the air like smog, adding pressure to Mark's heart. He felt trapped between two worlds: the glamorous, the boardroom, and his new, fragile connection with Emily. The tension heightened when Emily's former employer reappeared, maligning her capabilities in a public, humiliating display. Mark stood there, helpless, as he watched her confidence crumble, realizing with piercing clarity how systemic barriers ensnared people like Emily in a relentless cycle of despair. Their bond deepened through shared vulnerability, forging resilience that made Mark reconsider his concept of success. Could he step up and advocate for change without sacrificing everything he had built? As the snow continued to fall, heavy in the silence of the darkened street, they both stood on the precipice of something profound. Life-altering choices loomed before them. The weight of it all threatened to crush them, leaving the question hanging in the air: could their unlikely friendship withstand the trials that were sure to come? Mark's heart raced as he looked at Emily, her damp curls framing her face, her baby swaddled tight against her chest. The snow settled around them, creating a cocoon of quiet in an otherwise chaotic city. He fought against the icy grip of his colleague's judgment and took a step closer to Emily, urging her to share more. "What happens if you don't find a place soon?" he asked, concern etching deep lines on his forehead. Emily's gaze fell, and a shadow passed over her features. I don't know. The shelter is full. If I can't find somewhere soon." She paused, catching her breath, the emotion knotting in her throat. Mark understood. He had witnessed this cycle before, people being pushed to the brink, their dignity fraying. The fight in her spirit battled against the despair threatening to engulf her. Just then, the sound of honking horns broke the stillness, and Mark turned to see his Uber pull up. The driver's unsure expression mirrored the mounting tension within him. He felt the divide between his world and Emily's expanding into an insurmountable chasm. Yet, he stood there, torn. The warmth of his car and the opportunity to retreat into the safety of office politics were tempting. But the sight of Emily and her baby kept him anchored. "Listen, I know you must be tired. How about I drive you wherever you need to go? We can figure things out together." The offer felt clumsy but earnest, and Emily met his eyes, startled. "Are you serious?" Her voice hitched, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You don't have to do that, I want to." The words dropped from his mouth, solid and firm. The snow continued to swirl around them, and time felt suspended, wrapped in the moment they created together. A smile broke through Emily's uncertainty, fragile yet radiant. "I would like that," she said softly. The relief in her voice pierced Mark, igniting something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. For the first time, he sensed a shift, a breaking loose of emotional shackles. As he led her toward the car, an internal battle waged within him. Would he invite her into his world, his life? Would he risk everything to stand up against the disdain of his peers? Silently, he acknowledged the fear that buzzed like static in his mind. Yet, he also felt the thrill of possibility swell within him. Once they were inside the car, the warmth of the heated seats contrasted sharply with the cold outside. Emily glanced at her baby, worry flickering over her features. Mark couldn't help but ask, "What is his name?" "Aiden," she replied, her expression softening. "He is my light." Mark smiled, lost in the tenderness of the moment. He started the engine but sat still for a heartbeat, taking a breath. He reminded himself of the dreams he had when he built his company, the desire to make a difference. Suddenly, helping Emily felt like a part of that dream, not a distraction. "Okay, Emily, let us find a place where you and Aiden can thrive," he said, determination flaring inside him. As they drove, an invisible thread began weaving their lives together, possibilities unfolding with every passing block. Yet, amidst the hope, unseen challenges awaited. What obstacles lay hidden in the path ahead? As Mark navigated the streets of Chicago with newfound resolve, a question lingered like the snowflakes outside: could this connection with Emily change not just her life, but his as well? The streets of Chicago glistened under a fresh layer of snow, transforming the city into a winter wonderland. The world outside the car felt both cold and vibrant, as if holding its breath in anticipation. Inside, a warmth radiated between Mark and Emily, palpable and healing. As Mark pulled away from the curb, a small silence filled the car, punctuated only by the soft sounds of Aiden cooing from his mother's embrace. Emily glanced out the window, her face partially illuminated by the streetlights, highlighting the glimmer of hope in her eyes, even if framed by uncertainty. "Where do you want to go first?" Mark asked, trying to keep the conversation going, wishing to distract her from the weight of the moment. Emily turned, her brow furrowing slightly. "I don't really have a specific place in mind, maybe a motel. Just somewhere warm for the night. I can figure out the rest tomorrow," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded, relief flooding through him. He could help her take that first step. "There's one not too far from here. It should have rooms available." As they drove on, Mark could feel his own life centered on its course of spreadsheets, deadlines, and meetings slipping away. Instead, it was overtaken by the simple yet profound need to embrace compassion. He caught a glimpse of himself in the rearview mirror, an ambitious CEO racing through life, all too often wrapped in materialistic concerns. But now, he felt like a person, a neighbor, suddenly aware of the struggles so many faced beyond the glass doors of his office. Emily glanced at him, a slight smile betraying her calmer demeanor. "It's really generous of you to do this," she said, reaching for their shared moment, almost as if thanking him silently for breaking through her shroud of loneliness. "It's just a ride," he shrugged, but the warmth in his chest betrayed him. "Sometimes you just have to be there for someone else." In that instant, as snow flurries swirled outside, Mark felt the weight of their intertwined fates, the burden of compassion shifting the narrative of his life. Aiden gurgled from the back seat, and both adults turned to the sound, their hearts lifting even further atop the uncertainty. When they reached the motel, Mark parked and turned off the engine. The building stood there like a guardian, warm lights glowing invitingly against the snow, but doubt crept back into Emily's eyes as she stepped outside. "I don't have enough money for a room," she said, teeth biting her lip. Fear danced there, a stark reminder of her precarious situation. Mark's heart squeezed tight. "You don't have to worry about that. I can cover it. Just tonight. We'll figure out a longer-term solution after that," he insisted, holding her gaze. Emily seemed to hesitate, then finally nodded, taking a deep breath as if drawing courage from the air between them. "Okay, let us just take it one step at a time," she replied, her smile returning, though still tinged with caution. As they entered the lobby, the warmth swirled around them, but Mark could feel the chill settling back in as if a storm was gathering. He could sense the prying eyes of the receptionist, the judgment lingering in the air. "2 for 1 night," he said, pushing aside the disapproving gaze directed at Emily. "Please." After moments that felt like hours, the clerk reluctantly handed over a key. As they walked outside, Emily's eyes sparkled with gratitude and a new type of hope. But beneath the surface of this kindness, doubts lingered. Were they truly safe? Could their lives fuse together on this unpredictable journey? As Mark guided Emily and Aiden toward their room, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than himself. What challenges lay in waiting, ready to test their newfound connection? Would he be able to stand tall against the world outside, or would the judgments of others draw him back into the shadows? The answers remained shrouded in uncertainty, as the cold winter air whispered promises of change. The fluorescent lights of the motel flickered dimly as Mark unlocked the door to their room. He stepped inside first, holding it open for Emily and Aiden. The warmth enveloped them like a comforting blanket, yet the heaviness in the air was palpable. "It's cozy," Mark said, trying to light up the moment, though the room felt more like a temporary shelter than a home. He set the key down on the small table, its worn surface echoing the many lives that had passed through this space. Emily stepped inside, her eyes scanning the area. The faded floral curtains barely blocked the chill of the outside world, and the worn-out bedspread was more worn than inviting. But she smiled anyway, gratitude shining through her uncertainty. "Thank you for this. I didn't expect kindness like yours." Mark rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly shy under that weighty gaze. I can't imagine what you're going through. No one should face that alone." Aiden let out a soft coo, and his innocent noise filled the room. Emily turned to him, her whole demeanor softening. "He's the light of my life, you know," she said, her voice warmer than before. "He keeps me going." Mark observed the love in her eyes, something fierce and protective. It made him realize how fragile their situation was, how quickly everything could turn dark again. "Are you really prepared to dive deeper into this?" he asked himself, a sudden tremor of doubt resonating within him. "You know," Emily continued, bouncing Aiden gently in her arms, "I always thought life would go a certain way. I studied hard. I worked as a nurse, saved lives. I was proud." Her voice cracked slightly. "But lately, everything has unraveled." Mark leaned against the wall, taking in her words like a sponge soaking up water. "Hey, you're not alone anymore. We'll figure something out." He met her eyes, wishing for them both that this evening could ignite the spark of change and renewal. I don't want to be a burden." Her brow creased, shadowing the comfort their shared moment had built. "Burden?" Mark shook his head firmly. "No. You're not a burden. Sometimes we just need a little support. It's how we rise." They shared a moment of silence, the quiet hum of the heater droning lightly behind them. Mark's heart raced, sensing the connection deepening, the invisible thread weaving between their lives. Yet, he couldn't deny the underlying uncertainty lurking there. "If only I could stay longer, if I could help in a more meaningful way," he pondered aloud, his thoughts spilling. Emily looked down, the spark dimming. What's next, Mark? Tomorrow is a big unknown. I have no plan. All I can give Aiden is love, a love wrapped in uncertainty. Her honesty broke through him, pulling at his heart. You know what, Em? Sometimes love is the strongest plan there is. As their eyes locked, Mark felt something unforeseen shift. They were two people at crossroads, and perhaps together they could create a map where there had been none. But gradually, a question rose quietly in the back of his mind: what would happen when he returned to his life of suits and skyscrapers faced with the pull of reality? A sudden knock at the door jolted them from their reverie. Mark instinctively stepped forward, a rush of adrenaline. Who could that be? The question hung heavy in the air, threatening to unravel the fragile fabric of the evening. With hesitation, he turned the knob and opened it, revealing a stern-looking man in a uniform. The doorway felt like a threshold between hope and fear, and in that moment, uncertainty loomed larger than ever. What new challenge awaited them on the other side of that door? Mark's heart raced as he held the door ajar, ready to block any potential threat that might invade their sanctuary. The man standing there was no stranger to fear. He had the air of authority about him, a hardened expression that seemed carved from stone. Are you Mark Jacobs? The man asked, his voice low and clipped. Yes, that's me. Mark stepped back instinctively, a barrier forming between him and the looming figure outside. He glanced back at Emily, whose expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Why? Mark demanded softly, trying to keep the tension in check. Your car was spotted at the last gas station on the route to the city, the officer replied, scanning the room as if searching for something that might confirm his suspicion. I need to ask you a few questions. Emily took a step closer, her protective instincts kicking in. Is this about us? Just routine, the officer assured, though Mark noticed a hint of skepticism in his eyes. We're looking for a woman and her child who went missing a week ago. Mark's stomach dropped. The words hung in the air between them like thick fog, swirling with confusion and dread. He felt a surge of fear at the thought of Emily being entangled in something more dangerous than he could imagine. Missing? He echoed, glancing back at Emily. Her eyes widened in shock. Yes, the officer confirmed. We need to know if you've seen them. It's important. Mark's mind raced. The weights of the last few hours crashed down as he processed what this meant. Emily was no ordinary nurse, she was wrapped in a painful story, and now they were both swept into the tide of uncertainty. No, we haven't seen anyone like that, he said, shaking his head. Before he could finish, Emily's voice broke through, fierce and unyielding. I'm not who you think I am. I'm not running away from anyone. Aiden stirred in her arms, sensing her distress. Let's just take a breath, Mark began, trying to steer them back to calm, but Emily's fear was palpable, a living thing in the room. Why are you here? She pressed, her voice trembling. Why now? Because we have reason to believe someone may be in danger, the officer replied, his tone shifting to something more urgent. Mark felt the walls of the motel room close in around him. He had wanted to help Emily find hope and healing, but now their fragile moment was fracturing before his eyes. What if they come looking for you? Mark asked, concern etching deeper lines in his forehead. What if they find you? Emily swallowed hard, her grip on Aiden tightening. I can't go back, Mark. Not to that. The depth of her fear hit him like a freight train. It wasn't just about safety, it was about survival. Mark took a step toward her, his heart pounding. What can we do? The officer shifted his weight, clearly on high alert. We need to move quickly. If you're involved, I suggest we take this conversation somewhere safer. Mark's mind raced with possibilities, the weight of the officer's words clashing with his instincts to protect Emily and Aiden. Could they really run again? Or worse, would they have to surrender to a situation that felt insurmountable? Emily's voice pulled him back from his spiraling thoughts, her eyes pleading for connection, for a plan, for strength. He faced the officer, determination flooding his veins. No more hiding. We'll face this. The words felt monumental, wrapping around them like a promise, yet uncertainty gnawed at his resolve. Was he making a grave mistake, one that might unravel everything they had built in just a few precious moments? As the door creaked wider, Mark felt the weight of a decision press upon him. And in that moment, he realized that choice would define their next chapter, one that could lead to either redemption or ruin. What awaited them, he wondered, as they stepped into the unknown, armed only with fragments of hope and the bond they were slowly forging. Mark stepped out of the motel room, the chill of the evening air hitting him like a splash of cold water. Emily followed closely, Aiden nestled against her chest, the warmth of his small body offering a momentary comfort amidst chaos. The officer, whose name tag read Kendall, directed them toward his car, the urgency in his stride magnifying the gravity of their situation. "Get in," he ordered, not unkindly, but with a firmness that indicated there was no room for argument. Mark hesitated, glancing back at the motel door like it might open and swallow them whole. The air was thick with apprehension. "Where are we going?" Emily's voice trembled as she stepped forward, every instinct in her radiating wariness. "I'll explain on the way," Officer Kendall replied, his tone brooking no resistance. "We can't risk discussing this here. Too many ears." As they got in, Mark felt a mix of fear and determination swirling inside him. The officer turned on the engine, and the sound of the car's roar reminded him they were committing to a path they could not turn back from. He caught Emily's worried glance in the rearview mirror. She looked so fragile, and Aiden, blissfully unaware, was still clinging to her. "Mark, what if this is a mistake?" Emily asked, her voice a whisper. "What if they are looking for me? What if—" "Stop," he said gently, turning to face her directly. "We can't afford to think like that. We're in this together, okay? I won't let anything happen to you or Aiden." Her eyes softened, the flicker of hope battling against fear. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice trembling. "I've been running for too long." Mark reached across the car to grasp her hand, squeezing it with all the conviction he could muster. "You found a home now, Emily. We'll figure this out." As they drove through the dimly lit streets, the buildings blurred into shadows. Mark's heart raced with thoughts of what could come next. Officer Kendall took a turn towards a nondescript building that resembled a community center, nestled away from prying eyes. They stepped inside, Mark's protective instincts heightening again. The interior was small but warm, filled with soft lighting and a welcoming atmosphere that offered a fleeting sense of safety. "Sit," Kendall instructed, leading them to a small table as he pulled out a folder from a nearby desk. The papers inside crackled softly, a stark reminder of the very real reality they were caught in. "I need you both to be completely honest with me." Emily's eyes flickered with fear again, but Mark gave her hand another squeeze. "You can trust him," he assured her quietly, though a nervous knot twisted in his stomach. Kendall began to ask questions, his voice steady and professional. "I need to know everything you can about your past, Emily. It's vital for your protection." The room seemed to shrink around them as Emily began to reveal pieces of her story, bits of fear, sorrow, and the fight to protect her son. Mark could see the fragility in her as each word tumbled out, but he could also see the strength growing in her resolve. He listened intently, his heart breaking at the truth of her struggles, each revelation pulling him closer to her. With every uncomfortable truth, their bond felt more like a lifeline, but the intensity of what lay ahead also loomed ever larger. "Why now?" Mark interrupted, unable to contain the urgency in his voice. "Why are they looking for her now after all this time?" Kendall paused, the weight of the question settling heavily in the air. "Sometimes ghosts from the past return at the worst possible times." His eyes shifted, glancing between them. "And when they do, they bring danger." Mark's heart sank. What kind of danger were they in? But before he could voice his fear, the door swung open, cutting through the tension like a knife. In strolled two men, their faces set with purpose and intensity. Mark's gut clenched. Who were they? What did they want? And suddenly, the fragile feeling of safety they'd just grasped began to slip away again, the darkness closing in around them as uncertainty noisily filled the room. Mark turned to Emily, fear writ large in his eyes. What now? Mark's breath caught in his throat as the two men stepped further into the room. They moved like they belonged there, confidence radiating off them in waves. One was tall and lean, with sharp features that seemed to cut the air around him, while the other was more burly, the kind of man who could intimidate without saying a word. "Who are you?" Mark demanded, unable to mask the defensive edge in his tone. The tall man looked past Mark to Emily, his eyes narrowing with interest. "We're here to talk. You, Emily, have something we need." The air turned brittle, crackling with unsaid threats. Mark instinctively shifted in front of Emily and Aidan, his protective instincts kicking in like a switch flipped on. He glanced back at Emily. She had gone pale, clutching Aidan tighter as though he were the only shield she needed. "I said, who are you?" Mark repeated, stepping even closer, daring them to approach. "Names don't matter," the burly man said with a lazy drawl. "What matters is why we're here." Kendall shifted in his seat, his demeanor unsettled. "This isn't the place for this discussion," he interjected, trying to maintain authority. "You're scaring them." The tall man shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. "We're doing them a favor. The clock is ticking, and they're running out of time." Mark felt the tension tighten in the room, a noose slowly drawing tighter around their throats. "What do you want with Emily?" "She's done nothing wrong." The words came out more defensively than he intended, his voice rising with desperation. "Oh, she's done plenty wrong," the tall man replied, chin lifted in disdain. "But that's neither here nor there. What matters is her past. And the girl who sold her a lie." His eyes flicked toward Aidan, and Mark felt a surge of protectiveness rise within him. He couldn't let anything happen to them. Kendall, ever the stoic figure, broke the silence. "You need to leave. This is over. She's under my protection now." "Your protection?" The burly man laughed, a low rumble that echoed through the room. "You think you can keep her safe? We've got resources you can't even comprehend. All she has to do is give us what we need, and she walks away free." Mark could see fear creeping into Emily's eyes, the way she paled further with every revelation that passed between the men. "What do they want, Emily?" he whispered, recognizing the fracture lines of her past etched across her face. "They want the truth," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. "About my father. The things he did. They think I know something. But I don't." Realization flooded over Mark. The gravity of their situation crashed down like a tidal wave. They were tangled in a web of obligations and past sins. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, visualizing a way to protect the fragile family before him. "You won't get anything from us," he said, voice firm and unwavering. "Just leave us alone." The tall man stepped forward, closing the distance. "This isn't a negotiation." Mark's heart raced as he strategized. They had to think fast. Emily's eyes darted between him and the two men, desperate for a plan. Aidan clung to her tighter, sensing his mother's tension. Before he could form a coherent thought, Kendall broke in, his voice authoritative. "If you don't leave now, I'll call for backup." The burly man's gaze flickered to Kendall, uncertainty battling behind his hardened facade. Mark took the chance. "Yeah," he said tightly, "get out while you can. Or you'll regret it." The tension in the air crackled as the tall man hesitated, before turning to his partner. "Let us go. We don't need to do this here." With one last warning glare at Emily, they turned and strode out, leaving the door swinging behind them. Mark turned to Emily, his chest heaving as he felt the battle between relief and lingering dread. "We're okay for now." But they all knew it was only a temporary respite. The shadows of their past had not vanished completely. What did they mean? Mark asked, searching her eyes for answers. Emily took a deep breath, a flicker of resolve igniting in her. There's more to my story, something I didn't think would ever come back. But now she trailed off, fear clouding her resolve. Now, she had to decide whether to confront her past or keep running. The emotional weight of it settled around them, heavy and suffocating. "Emily, we need to talk. Whatever it is, we'll face it together," Mark urged, feeling the urgency pulse as he took her hand again, but what Emily didn't expect was that facing the truth might open a door to a peril even darker than the one that chased them. The silence that followed felt thick, almost smothering. Emily's eyes searched Mark's, that flicker of fear layered with desperation. She was at a crossroads, and Mark could sense the tumult brewing beneath the surface. He squeezed her hand tighter, wanting to convey strength, hoping she could draw from it. "Emily, please," he urged, awareness settling in. "Whatever it is, we can figure it out, but you need to tell me." She hesitated, glancing around the room as if it might give her the answer. Aiden, oblivious to the weight of the moment, shifted in her arms, his little face still scrunched up in confusion. Emily knew that keeping this from Mark was no longer an option. "Remember those letters? The ones my father kept talking about?" Emily finally began. "I thought they were just family business things I didn't care about. But now I realize there's something far worse. He was involved in deeper stuff than I ever knew. I thought I could just walk away from it all, but they found me. They want to finish what he started." Mark's stomach turned. The implications were relentless, closing in around them like a vice. "So they think you have answers. You don't, do you?" "No, but what if I did?" she whispered, panic rising in her voice. "What if there's something buried in all those papers? Something that might put Aiden in danger? I can't let that happen." Mark's mind raced. "That's why they were here? To intimidate you into giving them something you don't even have?" Emily nodded slowly. "They don't care if I don't know. They work for someone who does, and they'll stop at nothing to find it." The walls felt like they were closing in. Mark tried to think of a solution, but dread crept into every corner of his mind. "We can go to the police," he suggested, though he knew the suggestion was weak. "They'll protect you, us." Emily shook her head firmly, her resolve shining through the uncertainty. "They're connected, Mark. They're not someone you can just report." "What do you mean?" Mark's heartbeat quickened. "I mean that they have people who can make others disappear. My father knew too much, he was careful, but maybe just maybe I have something that could help us." The weight of the words hung in the air, but Mark didn't want to let go of hope. "What if we dig deeper? Find out what they really want? Maybe there's a way for us to control this." She looked at him, eyes wide and frightened, but there was a flicker of defiance in her. "You don't understand. This isn't just about me anymore, it's about Aiden. I have to do this for him." "Aiden needs his mother safe," Mark replied, searching her face for the woman he believed in. "And I need you too. We can't let them pull us apart." Suddenly, Emily's phone buzzed on the table, cutting through the tension. They all jumped at the sound. But it was the message that stole the breath from their lungs: a name, an address, and a time, tonight. "I know where to find them," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. "They want to meet." "Emily, no." Mark's tone sharpened, a protective fire igniting within him. "You can't go alone." "But what choice do I have?" she argued, tears filling her eyes. "If I don't, they'll come after us, Mark. I can't risk Aiden." They stood there, a chaotic storm of emotions swirling around them: fear, love, desperation. The scene felt like a ticking clock, each second resonating with the urgency of impending doom. Mark's heart raced wildly, thoughts flipping through his mind like pages in a story he didn't want to read. "We face it together, whatever it is. I want to let you do this alone. Please, Emily, let me help you." Time stood still as she studied him, her breathing quickening. The choice lay heavy in the air like a ghost. Finally, she nodded, the strength of her resolve shining through. "Okay," she said, the fire of determination returning. "Together." But even as those words left her lips, a shadow loomed at the edge of the room, unseen and unfelt, just waiting for the right moment to strike. As they prepared to confront the darkness that awaited, a haunting question lingered in the air: would the truth they unraveled lead to their salvation or their undoing? The streets were darker than usual, shadows stretching from lampposts and making the whole world feel more isolated. Emily and Mark clutched each other's hands tightly as they made their way through the dimly lit alley towards the meeting place. It felt like walking into the belly of a monster, knowing you had to face it head-on. Aidan had fallen asleep against Emily's chest, blissfully unaware of the danger swirling around them. "What if this turns out to be a trap?" Mark asked, his voice low and urgent. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to find somewhere safe. But this was not the time for retreat. He needed to protect them, to shield Emily and Aidan from the darkness lurking behind every corner. "It might be," Emily admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "But what other choice do we have? They've already found me once. I'd rather face them now than wait for them to make the next move." Mark wanted to argue, to tell her they should just turn around and run away, but they had already crossed a line. The stakes had escalated, and he could see the unwavering determination in her eyes. This wasn't just about her, it was about Aidan's future, too. They arrived at the address, a rundown warehouse that looked as if it had long been abandoned. The metal door creaked open, revealing an unsettling darkness within. Mark took a deep breath, and with one last glance at Emily, pushed the door wider. Inside, the air felt thick with tension. They moved cautiously, eyes darting around, every little noise amplifying their fear. Emily's heartbeat echoed in her ears, mingling with the distant sound of dripping water. "Stay close," Mark whispered. Aidan stirred slightly, instinctively clinging to Emily tighter, as if sensing their unease. In the faint light peeking through grimy windows, they spotted a figure tall, cloaked in shadow. It didn't move, just stood there, watching. Mark felt a chill run up his spine. Was this the person they had come to face? "Who are you?" he called, trying to project confidence despite the knot tightening in his stomach. The figure stepped forward, and as the light caught their features, Emily gasped. It was a face from her past, a face she thought she had left behind. "Emily," he said, his tone smooth but laden with danger. "I see you've brought a friend. How brave of you." Mark's grip on Emily tightened. "What do you want with her?" he demanded, stepping slightly in front of Emily, placing himself between her and the man. The man chuckled softly, a chilling sound that echoed in the emptiness around them. "Oh, we're all friends here, aren't we? I just want to know what you know about the letters." Emily felt the weight of his gaze, and suddenly the room felt suffocating. "I don't know anything," she shot back, her voice trembling with indignation. "Leave us alone. You can't threaten us." "But you don't quite understand, do you?" he replied, his voice dropping low. "Threats are only the beginning until they become promises." Mark could see the fear flickering in Emily's eyes, almost palpable, and it ignited a spark of fury in his heart. "You'll never get anything from her," he shouted, the protective instinct roaring to life. The man smirked, leaning back slightly as if enjoying a performance. "You don't get to decide what happens next, Mark. You don't know who you're dealing with." Suddenly, the door behind them slammed shut, a loud echo resonating in the silence. The darkness closed in, wrapping around them like an inescapable net. Panic surged through Mark, but he couldn't let it take hold. He felt for Emily's hand, squeezing it tightly. "Stay strong," he whispered, though doubts piled on top of each other. Their next move could determine everything. Emily's breath quickened, fear threatening to consume her. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man tilted his head, a predatory gleam in his eye. "That all depends on you and what secrets you're willing to reveal about your father." As he took a step closer, Emily's heart raced. Was she about to uncover the truth? Or would this be the beginning of a nightmare they couldn't escape? Dark questions loomed, and the tension in the air thickened. Everything was spiraling, and she had to make a choice: fight or surrender. In that moment, the stakes felt higher than ever. Would they finally learn the truth behind the letters, or would they find a tragedy waiting to unfold? With the echo of the slammed door still ringing in their ears, an oppressive silence enveloped the room. Mark's heart pounded like a war drum, and Emily's breath hitched in her throat. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as the figure moved closer. "Your father held secrets," he said, every word dripping with dark allure. "And you may be sitting on the key to a treasure trove of information." Mark tried to block the man's penetrating gaze, willing all his strength into protecting Emily. "You don't know the first thing about her," Mark asserted, his voice unwavering. "She's not a pawn in your twisted game." The man's lips curled into a sly smile. "Ah, but she is in so many ways, and you, the oblivious knight, might find your armor is little more than paper." Emily clutched Aidan tighter, his tiny form a precious reminder of what she was fighting for. The fear around her threatened to twist her mind, but she squared her shoulders, defiance rising in her chest. "I want to let you intimidate me," she replied, her voice stealing. "Let Aidan and I go. You're wasting your time." For a brief moment, surprise flickered across the man's features, replaced quickly by cold amusement. "You think you can keep playing this game without facing the consequences? Secrets don't just disappear." "But neither does courage," Mark interjected, stepping closer to Emily. "Whatever you're after, we won't give in. You may think you have the upper hand, but we're stronger together." The man's smile faded, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. He took another menacing step forward and raised an eyebrow. "How noble, how naive. What if I told you that holding on to these secrets would cost you more than you're willing to pay?" Each word felt like a blow, and Emily gritted her teeth against the truth spinning around them. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting it's time for the truth," he said, his words heavy with implication. "And the truth often comes at a price." It was then that Mark felt an overwhelming sense of urgency crashing over him like a wave. The stakes were rising, and they had to act. "Emily, we need to leave. We can't stay here. Whatever he wants, it's not worth Aidan's safety." As if sensing the shift in momentum, the man's demeanor suddenly changed. "You're right, Mark. That's exactly what I want. But you're playing a dangerous game. Protect your family, and do what it takes to shield them. The question is, are you willing to dig into the dirt to find the truth?" With renewed clarity, Emily straightened. There was something about his tone, something that struck her deep within. "If it means protecting my son, I'll face any truth," she said firmly, eyes blazing. "I'll confront this darkness head-on." Mark watched the determination in Emily's eyes ignite, and hope surged within him. They'd come too far, fought too hard to be intimidated now. "Then let us finish this," Mark declared to the man, jettisoning fear as he clenched Emily's hand tighter. "Whatever it takes." "Very well," the man said, adjusting his posture, the bravado restored in his demeanor. "But be warned, breaking the silence could bring more than just answers. It might unravel a truth you're not prepared for." Emily nodded, more resolved than ever. She wouldn't let fear dictate her life any longer. They had to face the past, whatever consequences lay in store. The man smirked. "We'll meet again, Emily. Just remember what you've set in motion." Ignoring the chill racing down her spine, Emily turned, leading Mark and Aidan toward the exit. They pushed the door open, stepping back into the night. The cool air hit them like reality, but the warmth of purpose coursed through her veins. The street was now flooded with the glimmer of streetlights, and Mark felt a profound shift inside him. Emily was no longer lost, she was a fierce mother fighting to reclaim her life. Together, they would confront the shadows. With Aidan cradled safely against her, Emily whispered to her son, we're going to be okay. Her voice was steady, her heart swelling with strength. And Mark, standing beside her, felt the grounding rush of commitment swell up. We'll protect each other. No matter what. As they stepped into the frigid night, the stars above twinkled like scattered hope. Both Emily and Mark knew the road ahead was riddled with uncertainty, but together, they had ignited a spark that would not be extinguished. This was the moment they would reclaim their lives, take back their power from the shadows of the past, and weave a future full of light for Aiden. They were ready to face the truth, together. Now, if you found inspiration in this transformative journey, you need to subscribe now to the channel. Don't wait not even one more second. Your support means everything. Leave a like right now to keep this story thriving in the algorithm. And I want to hear from you. Comment below, sharing your thoughts and feelings about this powerful ending. Finally, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation and understand the power of resilience. You are part of a community that believes in change. Join us.